Okay, so Ricardo, can you say something because you cut off before?
Thank you very much for you and everyone that is looking to this YouTube video. Bye-bye.
Great. Yeah, so I don't know if people joined me. No, we're still the same group. Okay, so welcome everyone to our third CoAct webinar. We are really happy that we have the opportunity to organize this. We had many more signups, and we hope that people will still, perhaps with a little delay, join us so we can have a nice discussion after all the great presentations I'm looking really forward to. As I said, this is the third webinar. Our first webinar, CoAct webinar, dealt with co-shaping evaluation in citizen science and was organized in cooperation with AXA and the EU Citizen Science platform. And the second focused on digital youth work. And you can find all the documentation on our website. I'm leaving the link in the chat actually to the recordings, to the documentation of the former webinar. Do I have to stop sharing my screen in order to put something in the chat here? Actually, or can I do it like this? I can do it like this, just in case someone is interested. Why does it not work? Well, I will share it later then with you. And before we start, I have to synchronize my slides and my some little notes. Like Ricardo already mentioned, that the webinar is streamed right now as we will be talking, and then afterwards it will be recorded and we will share it on the GIG YouTube channel and the CoAct website, so you can also share it in your respective communities. And if anyone would not like to be noticed, you can switch off your cameras and anonymize your names, which you can still do also if you put your real names in the upon sign in. So this just as logistical information, and I will briefly introduce you to CoAct. Our CoAct is a 3-year European funded Horizon 2020 project, and it's run by a consortium of members from academia and civil society from Germany, Austria, Spain, and Argentina. We basically work towards a rethinking of the role of civil society in research processes. So we have the ambition to place citizens living in vulnerable situations at the center of participatory research and innovation cycles. In the process of developing a respective citizen social science approach, we are working with what we call research and innovation actions. And these address 4 different social problems. So we work on mental health care in Barcelona, on youth employment in Vienna, on environmental justice in Buenos Aires. And we are working on gender equality in Europe. This is an open call to participation, an open call to civil society groups, which we are just about to launch the coming week. So keep an eye on our website, and we will also spread the word throughout various channels. This is basically the research and innovation cycle we are currently applying throughout these actions in order to explore and to shape the approach. And we are also currently compiling a toolkit of methods, resources, and learning for all these different phases that we are basing our work on, which will also be launched on our website in the near future. So a bit of promotion here. And then I'd also like to briefly introduce. Oh. Do you see the slide still at full screen? Like this, no? The GIG, so this is the Global Innovation Gathering, one of the coalition partners of the CoAct project, which I'm representing, and from which side we are organizing this webinar today. So we are one of the coalition members, and GIG is a global network of social and technology or technological innovators, basically. We are like a diverse, vibrant community of innovation hubs, maker spaces, hacker spaces, and other grassroots innovation community spaces and initiatives, as well as individual innovators, makers, technologists, change makers, like from all around the world, basically. And we work with a high sensibility towards contextuality, given our diverse context and how we create our community. So towards sensitivity towards contextuality and the different understandings and framings and risks, etc., in those diverse communities we are compiling, so to say. And this is also super critical when wanting to develop a citizen social science approach, which is our mission as CoAct, no? So let's get started here. Let's do this. Yeah, so as CoAct, we are proposing a new understanding of citizen social science as participatory research, co-designed and also directly driven by citizen groups. And we therefore bring together and further develop methods to give citizen groups an equal understanding or an equal seat at the table through active participatory research. But of course, within such an approach, we understand that like the framing comes prior to the methods we apply. So what are our joint understandings? What are our diverging understandings, for instance? Who gets to say, like, what does it really mean? What does participation really mean for whom? And how does it look like? What is out there already? What is happening already? Which experiences are there already to incorporate? And how do we account for a whole lot of different power dynamics which come into this? Who is part of this project? Who gets a say? Whose work is featured how? So there are millions of questions to ask, of course. So our objective is to contribute to the collective shaping of citizen social science, or of the approach of citizen social science that is rooted in diversity and that accounts for all the multiple and oftentimes marginal practices equally. That's what we strive to achieve, at least. And today we will therefore zoom out a bit, and we want to critically reflect on the lenses through which science as such is oftentimes perceived and framed, which is oftentimes an academic one. But science as such is so much more than that, of course, and civil society is providing an incredible contribution to science, conducting engaged research on the ground, deriving from what is really needed, what is needed in their direct environments, the latter largely differing on the multiple contexts we are dealing with and we are living in, be it cultural, be it political, be it infrastructure. There are so many nuances to think through, no, when we talk about how is science defined, how can it be defined, how should it be defined. And this is not an either or for us. So it's close collaborations between academia and society STEM crucial to ensure research response to actual needs. But we wish to ensure that such a framing is thought about multi-directional. So academia inviting civil society in, but as much as civil society being in the lead and perhaps inviting academia in when they need and on their terms. So having this more holistic view on how science is shaped and how it is enacted, no? And all directions are relevant for us as CoAct, as we strive to develop a citizen science approach. And we believe that it's very important to unpack those multi-dimensions and preventing old pitfalls of limited or top-down or Western-centric approaches and ways of thinking built into the DNA of this approach as it evolves, right? So, and therefore today we start with wanting to learn from 3 really inspiring examples. And we will take a local perspective. So looking at different examples in a global context, but really at very local applications, no, of participatory approaches, and what that means, and how the contexts actually play very crucial roles. So learning, we will learn from participatory research initiatives in 3 different contexts. mainly to explore 3 driving questions: how is scientific research understood? How is scientific research done from within civil society? And how does civil society collaborate with academia in their research? As like framing questions, and then we will go deeper into detail later also in our discussion. 3 participatory researchers from civil society organizations in Brazil, Canada, and Ghana will share their work and experience with us today, building on their inputs. We will open up to a plenary later on, and then to all participants for a joint discussion and questions to ask and so on. And as an outcome of the webinar, we therefore, as I already said, we wish to contribute to the collective shaping of the approach, of a citizen social science approach that is really rooted in diversity, that accounts for this multiplicity of perceptions, of needs, and so on, equally. So I will introduce our great speakers to you now. So we will start with Khan Rai. I hope I pronouncing your name correctly, Khan. He's an Afghan-Canadian community-based research practitioner and lecturer affiliated with the Canadian Community-Based Research Network and the local institute in the US. And he has been active contributor of scholarship, grassroots promotion, and collaborator of community-based research in affiliation with the World Social Forum on science and democracy, and the Science Shops and the Living Knowledge Network since its creation. He has been a member of Living Knowledge conference organizing team that have been held all across Europe since 2001. And Khan's recent CBR and current research practice include, for instance, inequities in COVID-19 vaccination programs in Toronto and Los Angeles, and the revitalization of multiracial neighborhoods in Toronto and Canada. Welcome, Khan. Really, really great to have you here. I will introduce all of you before we then go into the presentations. So then I'd love to say a warm welcome to Joanna Jamel. She's a creative economy consultant who spends her time working on programs and projects that realize her passion for human dignity and the development of the African youth. And she's the program coordinator of the Ghana Design Network, which seeks to develop the ecosystem of design in Ghana, and a content consultant for Picha, an Afrocentric visual content provider using images to change the narrative of modern Africans in the media. As a design thinking facilitator, she has engaged over 500 young girls, children, and cumulatively over 1,000 young entrepreneurs, students, relevant stakeholders in using a human-centered design approach to train, draw experiences, and to write stories for various partners such as UNICEF, UNDP, PAC Ghana, and the Cosmos Innovation Center. Warm welcome also to you, Joanna. And then I'm really excited to introduce Bianca to you. Bianca is a journalist and writer with a master's degree in education and a PhD in information science at the University of Sao Paulo. And she's also a columnist of the magazine Gamma, and as a member of UNEAFRO, I hope I pronounced this correctly. She has collaborated with the Black Coalition for Rights and is now dedicated to the development of Casa Sueli Carneiro, a space to gather memories of anti-racist fight in Brazil. And Bianca is the author of the books Quando me descobri negra and Continuo preta, a biography of Sueli Carneiro. And she's also board member of the civil liberties organization Article 19 Brazil, as well as the Marielle Franco and Vladimir Herzog Institutes. So warm welcome also to you, Bianca. I'm really excited to have all the 3 of you with us today and listen to your inspiring stories. So I would then ask Khan to share your experiences with us, and then we move further. So I will stop sharing my screen now. And I assume, Ricardo, you will share. No, not true. You don't have the presentation. You speak freely, right? So then I hand over the word to you.
Okay, thanks very much for this, for the introduction. And also, I appreciate this opportunity to be able to share my practical and intellectual engagement in this area. And hopefully I managed to share the depth of the experiences that I have had, and also be able to encourage a debate among us, so that we share our perspectives to see where we go from here. I basically ventured into titling this session is to a revisit of the role of civil society in the context of doing research or collaborative engagement with the academic community. And the reason I'm saying that is a revisit is because of the fact that there's been a lot happening ever since the whole notion of community-based research or community participatory research came to be on the scene early in 1990s. So by way of actually context and background, I'm Afghan Canadian by background in terms of my social location. In terms of work experience and discipline, I have sociology, anthropology background, and also social work practice. And my research has been predominantly community-based research, but also I have had the opportunity to run a what you call civil society organization. And that was solely in many major ways involved in doing work with varieties of immigrant and refugee groups across country, in Europe, and also in Australia to some degrees. So essentially, what I would want to do is basically to give you my perspective, and beyond that, after that, basically to go into some specific projects, not to really bore you with the details of anything, because each one of those projects are have happened in different contexts, but essentially to extract the essential elements so that we can engage a discussion around that, how these things actually play in practice. And I thought in order to capture this presentation in a nutshell, in a much more perhaps coherent way, I started basically with a guiding question. The guiding question is essentially reads as that: what strategies should everyday citizens and civil society institutions use to engage in collaborative research partnerships with the academic community, and would this enhance the role of everyday citizens and civil society organizations to impact the science and society interaction, essentially to see whether we see some result enabling people to have access, control, and meaningful engagement using scientific methods, results, and outcomes. Essentially, this, in a nutshell, brings me to the question of, okay, so how do we see from our practice what community-based research or community participatory research basically stands? Essentially, the idea is that behind this definition is essentially to see that we gather data and we keenly listen to hidden transcripts within the community and identifying community strengths and assets in order to be able to meaningfully participate with a clarity and the highest degree of authenticity. So with this approach, essentially, which actually the Loka Institute back in late 80s, I started pioneering this community-based research, and I was actually a coordinator of community-based research, a component of the local institute, and we're doing a fair amount of work in promoting advocacy and advocating that community-based research is a way to go in order to engage everyday citizens. And also we were actually annually bringing people together to a conference, essentially, whose focus was essentially to see that everyday a large number of everyday citizens participate, and essentially small groups, grassroots organizations have the opportunity to attend. So basically, the way I see this is that everyday citizens, and by everyday citizens, we mean essentially people who are not institutionally connected, but they have a keen interest on an issue or a question that is actually close to them, and they care for. So in that sense, it's important to see that grassroots approach to addressing any question that may be of interest to people. With this in mind, essentially that the way or the most effective way to see community, it's civil society organizations or institutions and everyday citizens engage is if there are appropriate provisions, resources, and more importantly, that there is enough space created so that people freely can participate and engage. So in a nutshell, it boils down to the question of resources. Universities always had the privilege to have the space occupied, that I had the resources, they had the institutional weight, they also had people whose job was actually to search, question, and conduct research and do on a variety on almost any issue that I felt like doing. Whereas a community or everyday citizens in civil society community is more restricted in the sense that essentially people deal with issues that were actually most of the time of urgent matter, and other times basically were things that I really cared for or affected their lives. So, and also they were disadvantaged in the sense that they did not have the tools or enough of the resources to ask the right questions or to actually proceed beyond the question to go into conducting research and basically more importantly to use the outcome. So here, in a nutshell, the idea is basically to see that the moment we engage in the community-based research activity, that people have the tools and resources to engage. So how we do that? I think creating a space where that opportunity and access is open is a key element of that. And the other question is, of course, an equal a structure arrangement that allows everybody to participate, to be a part of what's being done, and as I said earlier, essentially also to have the ability to use the outcome of research to basically affect social or other structural changes. And by way of illustration, one example that I've been involved for almost 15 years, essentially in Canada, and back in 1996, a project was initiated by the government of Canada, but essentially the financial allocation was given to an arm's length agency, which was a research council. Now I can go into more detail, but I just want to check the time. Basically, do I have still time to go, or I basically stop here?
You have like 2 minutes, roughly, a bit less.
This particular project allowed basically the participation of academics, civil society, and policymakers, which means government. And the structural arrangement was that without these three components, none of the projects could actually be eligible to get the resources or the funding. And five centers were created across the country. Each one of those centers had these components in place. And in that sense, community, civic society organizations, community-based organizations had the opportunity to be part of around the table and benefit from the resources and the research opportunity. But I will, later on when we get into discussion, I'll go into more detail, but essentially, bottom line is that, as earlier indicated, that unless there are structural arrangements that allow equal participation, community-based research activities will remain in name, and also essentially will boil down to a community relations exercise by universities to go into communities and basically extract knowledge, but communities will be disbarred in a sense of not having access to the knowledge that essentially came from them. So this has been always a tension, sometimes healthy and other times not very healthy tensions between community or civil society and the university community or academic community. In any case, I'll be happy to come back to some of these points. I think I just jumped from one point to another point, essentially to give you a flavor as to where I come from. I'd be happy to engage further in detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khan. Really interesting, and I'd really love to indeed, dig deeper into this later, especially also, what has happened since the 80s? Like, has the discourse and the practice really evolved, given that we do know these things? And really interesting also one thing, the aspect you mentioned about resources, and discuss a bit like how difficult is it to rethink and adjust those those framing conditions. And then of course for GIG also a very important topic, the discussion on openness and open sharing of knowledge and tools and everything. Thank you so much. I'm looking really forward to discuss this further later. And now I'd really welcome Joanna to join her experiences with us. Hey, Joanna, over to you.
Hi. Yes, thank you very much, Kirsty. I would be sharing a project that we embarked on. It's called the Visual Activist Campaign. And the main idea was to push forward the representation matter theme, that Africans are very diverse, and we were using this campaign to challenge the one-dimensional narrative of the representation of Africans in the media. And with this, we actually brought together people from all over the continent and in the diaspora, because we really wanted it to be very much participatory in the sense that it's also voluntary, so people willingly decide to participate in the program. And it was mainly to push for what is happening in the diversity and inclusion space as far as the African community and Black communities are concerned. So I believe my presentation will be up, or I can share my screen, which? Okay, yeah, Ricardo. Yes, so this is the Visual Activist Campaign, and we mainly said that the theme was for all Africans and Black communities to rise up, be seen, and then use their own stories to change the visual narrative. So we are going to see a short video about the campaign. The next slide.
Africa and her people are beautifully diverse.
And yet, the world's perception of Africans and Black communities is not always their reality.
So many misconceptions and prejudices are born from these limited points of view.
This is why we believe in authentic representation.
No more stereotypes, no more generalizations.
The time has come to celebrate and showcase the diversity of African and Black people
all over the world. It's time for change. Representation matters because we don't all look alike.
Because we all deserve to be equally and fairly represented in the media we consume.
We are here. We've been here. Rise up. Be seen and change the visual narrative about our people. Join the movement. Become a visual activist.
Okay, thank you very much, Ricardo. So like you saw in the campaign, this campaign is being run by my organization, PICHA. And PICHA is basically a visual visual content provider, using images and curating these images to change the narrative of Black communities and Afrocentric communities or Afro descendants. And what we do is to enable people, brands, and businesses to tell richer stories that include Black communities. And we do this through photography, videography, and illustrations. And the main reason why Picture was set up was also because this is very important, and the fact that the stories that come along with what people see, the images, can change perceptions. And next slide, please. So, like you said, you saw in the video, the campaign is actually an inclusive campaign. And what we are trying to do is to change this one-dimensional narrative of Africans that were always being represented in the media as underdeveloped and poor and hungry. And we knew that that was not the reality of all Africans. So we wanted a more wholesome approach, a more wholesome story that the continent is very diverse. In the diaspora, we are really diverse. We are in different countries. Africa is not one country. It's actually a continent made up of 54 different countries. And it's actually more than 1 billion people with thousands of different languages and multiple cultures. And the fact that it wasn't just villages or rural settings. There are peri-urban, there are urban settings. And the whole idea was to showcase this through the visuals that we put forward. And we saw that this was also an opportunity in time, because now the stories that had been told were being told by non-Africans mostly, and also the fact that now the internet was available, technology was available, Africans had been skilled and had trained themselves up to use cameras, videos, to tell the story and take back the pen and start telling their own stories. And then this was also to say that to have us represented in the media, in the stories, with our own stories matters to us. So it was mainly championing a digital archive, which will run continuously as long as the internet age or the digital era exists. Next slide, please. So sometimes in our interactions, when we got on with Kirsty as well, we're thinking, okay, so people consider research to be one and then creative industries to be another thing. But there's always that synergy, because visual storytelling is an element of science. It's an element of social science where we bring in people, we speak to a particular subject, and we organize this knowledge on this particular subject. So for this particular campaign, we were organizing the knowledge and experiences based on diversity and inclusion. And we also use it as a study of our own nature and our own behavior and how we obtain knowledge about, for example, in this particular context, African people and Black communities. And we used a systematic and comprehensive investigation, because it wasn't just a one-off thing. It was people bringing in from different countries, curating the stories through very structured and very diverse content. So we were looking at how you have experienced diversity in your own story, or how you have felt included or excluded in a particular issue, and what caused it, what were the effects. So we made sure that it goes through the elements of science, of observation. Photographers were there and they identified these people. People are brought in to describe their own experiences and tell their own stories. And also the fact that science is very much rooted in an element of evidence, because it says it has to be true, it has to be factual. And one of the biggest evidences that the world provides now is a picture, an image, a video, because it enables people to ensure or tell you that, yes, indeed, we existed. This is what our story is. And people tell it in their own voice, in their own experiences. So it's no longer a reported thing. And it's also a continuous process. So anytime someone goes on to this campaign and adds their story, whether it is today or tomorrow, 2 years from now, it's going to be an online, ongoing process of learning. And that science has brought up a lot of knowledge. So one of the misconceptions that one of the participants said is that people think they know. And it is important that scientists or researchers always have it at the back of their minds that even after finding out something, you don't always know everything. So it's important that you actually absorb people's stories so that you can know what they have walked through or what they have been through. The next slide, please. So in using the citizen approach, we were looking at moving it from a reported speech or a reported research, someone going on the field to do the research and telling it as they have observed, moving it from third and second persons to a first person, where the subject of the research matter is now in the driver's seat. So through storytelling, we chose storytelling visuals in the power of media, because storytelling, for one, has been known that it's a way that the brain engages or relates with the human person who is telling that story, rather than just relating with data and information. And also, when you use storytelling, it is an opportunity to learn from another person's experience. Storytelling also shapes and strengthens or even challenges our opinion and our values. And the fact that it has the power to increase empathy and reinforce high ideals such as compassion and kindness, which we really, really need in our worlds today. And one of the impacts of visuals is also that it has the power to trigger the right emotions. So many things being done in the communities nowadays are based on how people feel about certain things. And therefore, it is important that what people see and how they communicate with the visuals that they see are able to trigger the right emotions and also create strong impressions. Science provides evidence over time, and therefore memories are important for science to last. And therefore we realize that when images are available, when videos are available, it creates much more learning experiences that are more lasting, and also provides the evidence that is so much needed in science. And one of the ways that we did this, and the reason why we realized that media is one of the most important channels, is also because media is one of the most powerful tools that influences thoughts, perceptions, opinions, and beliefs. And it is the fundamental thing that runs people's lives. So what people see through the media actually affects how they also interact with other people. And it also has the power to skew a person's knowledge. So how you are being tuned into, whether to the right, to the left, to the front, to the center, is mainly on how you are being influenced or your thoughts are being skewed. And it has also formed the narratives that have gone over time with generations, and people have related with people based on what they have seen in the media. And it also actually has the power to reach the ends of the world. So we did this campaign in Africa, but we have reached the ends of USA, Asia, Europe, and that is the power of media. So how did we bring people in understanding the power and shaping citizen social science project? Drawing an inspiration from a South African visual activist, Zanele Muholi, she said that it is about making sure that we exist in the visual archive, and it is about declaring that we are here and we can write and we can contextualize and we can visualize our world as first persons, and that it is our responsibility to undo all these phobias that have been wrongly attached to our identities. This is very important because in CSS, it's mostly about giving the power to the person, giving the power to the people to drive their own stories. And we are looking at citizenship approach, participatory approach. So why don't you let the person tell their own story? Next slide, please. So how did we draw people in to participate in this particular campaign? You'll see it in the next slide. We told them that through a human-centered design approach, we know that the citizen participatory approach is also a very much human-centered design approach. And with this, we said, add your voice, tell your own story, share your own experience, own the narrative, and leave a legacy, but also provide evidence. So for those who are comfortable, you can do a video, you can do a picture. And with this particular approach, we were reframing questions through people's own experiences and opinions and real life interactions with the systems and structures that have coined these misconceptions. So we were not going there with already made questions. We were saying that, what is your experience? What is your opinion on this matter? And with that, we are able to draw out different forms of questions for that. So we had a lot of participants who voluntarily participated in this. This lady from Nigeria, Mary, she said that I have been bullied because I don't look like them. And that is her experience of how she looks like, because she looks different from her colleagues. She has freckles. And she said because of that, growing up, she had been bullied a lot. Another story that we had from Rita from USA, she said that one of the biggest misconceptions that she has encountered with people is that Blackness is monolithic, and that the Black culture spans as wide as the ocean. The narrow view of of Blackness leads to misconceptions and perpetuates negative stereotypes of African American culture. And that was her story in the USA. The next participant was Ramsey, and Ramsey was saying that his interaction with people was saying that Nigerians are fraudsters, and therefore anytime that he went somewhere and identified as a Nigerian, the misconception that greeted him was that, oh, this person is a fraudster and therefore he cannot be trusted. It affects his work, it affects his interactions with people outside of Nigeria most of the time. Another participant, this is Joseph from Gabon, said that he hates to hear the general misconception that Africans or Black people are lazy, and that I have never seen such a hardworking people full of creativity, and that was his own experience with the Black people. The next participant is Tembi Terry from Zimbabwe, and she's saying that as a woman in Africa, when she speaks up, she's considered to be wild, unmannered, and disrespectful. And these are some of the participants' interactions and expressions that they shared with us on the story. And when you visit the Visual Activist campaign, you see so many more stories on people's own issues. And this was an opinion on why diversity matters to you. And Nedi from Tanzania said that it is the bedrock of humanity and the very foundation of our existence. And it's like a building. Once its foundation is strong, it can withstand any storm. So we brought in stories and their own experiences from people, and with that there are hundreds of people on the platform who are sharing their own stories. And I shared my own here on my thoughts on racism and diversity and why it matters to me. One of the things that I had been fascinated about growing up was the Black Star in the Ghanaian flag. If you've seen, like it was shown, you see the Ghanaian flag, there's a small Black Star in there on the yellow flag, on the yellow part of the flag, and it's supposed to represent hope for the African continent. And I was thinking about it, like, how can something Black become a star? Because all along, all the stars that we see, it's something yellowish or bright and light. And this is a Black star. So how does a Black star even shine? Can you even see it when it's up in the sky? So can you even see it at all? So it made me think about it. And I realized that it also affects the way Black people progress. What is our shine? What is our development? What is our progress in the world in general? How are we being included in development conversations? How are we being excluded in certain social conversations? Or how are we being included or excluded in certain advancements of the world? And it made me realize that one day we will wake up and realize that the color of darkness is not Black, because that has been the misconception and the attribute of Blackness, that anything that is Black is dark, it's not good, it's ugly, it's bad. And we will also realize that the color of light is actually not white, because in our past, we have because of colonialism and post-colonialism effects, people have the mentality that everything that comes from the West is the best. So we might realize that the color of light is actually not white. And we may be ashamed, and we will be ashamed of the wide gaps that we have created in society because of this needless negativity that has been carefully curated about certain races, about Black, it could be brown, it could be red, it could be any other race. But generally, bringing in this participatory approach gives you the elements of science and information and knowledge that you need to rethink and reframe how you involve people, how you involve citizens from different parts of the country, different parts of the continent, to tell their own stories and be sure that they are also documented as existing. And that's basically one of the projects that we run. So our call to action for anybody who is listening is that be a game changer, be a hand raiser, be a difference maker, an impact hero. You can become a visual activist or a visual diversity champion. You can go onto the website, that's www.visualactivist.me. If you have your own experiences with Black communities, if you identify as an Afro-descendant, you can share your story and let the future generations who come 10 years, 20 years from now know the kind of people that existed before them. So thank you very much. And this is basically the project. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. I really like your energy when talking about your project. It's really inspiring. And I'm really looking forward to discuss this also later. One is the rawest form of participation in non-framed handing over completely to people to tell the stories in whatever way and however they want. And also the direct enactment of it by, having the direct connection to actually use this imagery, use these stories in the media, in representing formats, so to say, which is another topic to talk about. No, like, how do we create research that is applied, that matters, that is really used and doesn't remain somewhere in a shelf, no? And then linking this later on to the issue that that Khan mentioned this morning about resources, and how, you know, what limitations do we have in academic funding resources, for instance, in enabling this really unframed research, not having predefined outcomes or something. Like, do we, you know, like, how can we break down challenges that are remaining there? So thank you so much. And also, yeah, looking forward to more later. And now I would love to welcome Bianca. Really, really happy to have you with us, and that the connection stayed so far, and I hope it will keep up, and looking forward to hear your story.
Thank you very much, Cassie, and thank you. It's great to hear you, Khan and Joanna. I have learned a lot, but my connection is really unstable, so I'm afraid you cannot hear me. So please, it's okay? Okay, so let's go. Ricardo will help me with my presentation, and I'd like to share with you a project that I contribute in Brazil called Popular Agents. So we work in 5 Brazilian Black communities, and we are working with scientists and with people in the communities, helping people, taking care of people during pandemics. Please, Ricardo, you can put the next. As you know, Brazil is a terrible place where to live during this pandemics. We have more than 500,000 people killed by disease that we have vaccine. But as you know, our president and our government is not working for life. They are working hardly for killing people. Because of this, we say we are watching a genocide here in Brazil. A genocide that is especially directed to Black people. And when we say Black people in Brazil, we are talking about people with different tones of color, skin color. As Joanna said, African people and Afro-descendant people, we are really diverse. So I am Black in Brazil, as a person like Joanna is Black here too. And we are in the streets. This picture was taken in the last Saturday in São Paulo, and in lots of different cities in Brazil. People were in the streets asking for the impeachment of the president, and fora Bolsonaro, it means out Bolsonaro, get out of here. And but it's not enough to denounce what's happening here. Because of this, in UNEAFRO, there is a Black movement working with education in different communities in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. We started this project in April 2020. And we work in 5 different communities, as I have said before. So we have trained popular health agents, people that don't work with healthcare, people who are not scientists or professional of health, but they received a training for working in the communities in different perspectives. So contagion prevention, of course, monitoring people with symptoms, with psychological support, and we are working to support, to ensure hospital care, because it's really hard here. Many times when people is really bad and goes to the hospital, they say, okay, go home. And people are being killed at home of this disease. And of course, we incentive vaccination too, because we have a lot of people saying that you don't have to get this vaccine because you will be like an alligator or something like this. It's something terrible. But we are working together with scientists in the Fiocruz, that's a very respectable research center here. They gave us I don't know how to say this in English, but they approve our material and our protocols for taking care of people. So community people are leading process. In this picture, you can see Alessandra. Alessandra lives in the periferia of São Paulo, a poor and Black neighborhood. And Alessandra, she is a mother of 5, and one of his sons was killed by police. There's another terrible reality in Brazil. The state killed Black young men, and now we are seeing they killing Black women too in the streets. As we saw last week, a pregnant woman was killed in the street during the day by a policeman. So Alessandra, she deals with his pain working for her community. And in this moment, she's giving a person with symptoms of COVID the kit we give people for prevention and for monitoring symptoms. Of course, we do this with scientists, as I said you, and it's very important that scientific evidence serve community, not the opposite. Care and attachment are very important as information. Lots of people tell us that the most important and during the disease is to have someone taking care, talking, worried with you and giving you information too. We work together with the public health system, and we of course defend this system. We call it SUS here in Brazil. We have a public healthcare system. We are producing data and we are analyzing this data, collective scientists and people that are working in the streets. And we use these data for political advocacy. For us, the next please, Ricardo. Thank you. We have a monitoring flow really complex, designed by doctors, but this flow is implemented by people from community, as we said. And we have developed a technological system. Bantu, he is a Black man, he is a tech Black man, and he developed a system for controlling this flow. So when we monitor people with symptoms, we do this in a system called CoAct. That's the name of an Afro-Jamaican nurse. And the system was designed with free software, and we have people data in our servers because it's really important to take care of people in this sense too. We cannot use a platform from a big enterprise that wants our data for getting money, not for taking care of people. Because of this, we developed this system called CoAct. you can see the system in the next slide, please. Thank you. Yes. And we can go to the next, please. Thank you. And communication is part of this project too. So we are doing this communication in the streets. We put information in the schools, in the streets. We give people some paper that we have produced. We have this bicycle with a sound, with a music, and with information, helping people to prevent and to taking care of themselves. And we have lots of videos and material in the internet. We have a web series with legend in English. If you want to take a look, you can go to our website, Agentes Populares de Saúde, in Portuguese, and take a look in these videos. Please, next, Ricardo. Can you hear me?
Yes, there was a little gap, I think, but now we hear. Now, no. Try again, perhaps. If you hear us, Bianca, perhaps try to restart. Yeah. So we lost Bianca, I think. I hope for a moment, and I hope she will come back. And if so, of course, we can also listen to the remaining part of her really inspiring story. But
yes,
I would suggest.
I'm here, Cassie.
Ah, great.
I think
perfect.
Thank you. And sorry. I hope you have listened. This is Maria, a Black woman. And when she was fine, she made a cake with this picture for saying thank you very much. And I'm very well now. And we have some people that all time give us a feedback about this project. People that feels were not didn't have this kind of care in their lives. Doctors that really talk with them, and people that are really worried about them. So next, please, Ricardo. And since April 2020, we attempted 758 people, and 3 of them were killed per COVID. Of course, it's terrible to say that we lost 3 people. But when we look Brazilian data, we are very confident about this project because we really could take care of people. And it showed us how it would be if we had a government willing to take care about people. And this is a count that I cannot explain you because mathematics, it's not with me, but we have a sanitarist in the project that says that when we treat 700 people, we are indirectly working with 45,000 people. So it's a community, Black people from community working hard with academic researchers and doctors and different people for taking care of our own communities. I think I have a last one. Yes, only to say thank you and fora Bolsonaro. Sorry for my connection problems. I hope we can talk now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Super interesting as well. And yeah, I would really love to discuss further. I mean, two things, mainly the really reverse dynamic of community taking action based on the immediate needs felt in their own communities that they are part of, and proactively asking academia in for quality control, to use the term, for certain things, no, where you want to be sure, but having this reverse dynamic. And the other thing which I find so important to also elaborate further is the element of care, and what this means, and how this is generally often treated within research, and in how far this direct connection to your community, or better embeddedness in your own community, actually is a very, very important component in being able to include this component of care to an extent needed, no? Especially when working on such sensitive elements as health, and especially in such severe situations as we are in right now, and then in your particular context in Brazil, with the government you have. So thank you so much, everyone. I don't know even where to start. I think I will just, maybe ask a few elaborations on these aspects that I found really outstanding to discuss in the wider perspective of framing a citizen social science approach, and what we should account for and think further in the process, and then open up to everyone. I mean, we're a small group, so we can have a nice conversation all together easily, I think, at this point. Great. I think, I mean, these are the aspects really that I mentioned, I think, for the last, and then also opening up for you, Khan and Joanna, and your experience with this is, you know, this embeddedness in your own community or your own environment, no, like how this really changes the dynamic, and your experiences also with inviting academia in, or inviting researchers in to control, to oversee, to counter-check certain of your developments of certain frameworks or approaches. Like, what are your experiences with this reverse? Like, how has it been perceived, and how has it been possible to also formalize such a collaboration, let's say? Whoever would like to take the word, or we lost Bianca again for the moment, but maybe Khan and Joanna, you also have experiences in those regards.
Well, I'll start just to pick up. First of all, it's amazing, and I'm really thrilled and informed about the situation of image making in the African context, and more specifically the situation, a dire strait situation that is developing in Brazil. Is so disheartening to really see what's happening. What has been happening in Brazil is just absolutely unconscionable what the political system in Brazil is doing. Essentially, it boils down to the question of it's a power dynamics. When you have an academic community, individual or otherwise, and by the way, an individual academic does represent an institution, whether they like it or not. As soon as they introduce their location is an institution. Whereas in contrast, civil society representations are basically in that context of being a citizen, unless they carry on an institutional identification. So the power dynamics plays right there in the first instant. Let's say a question arises about the whole scene of, say, in the case of a classic case that we always use in our advocacy is an organization called We Act. Actually, they're still active in New York. And this is a very interesting illustration. I'll give you another one as well. Essentially, issues came up from air pollution that was created due to the fact there was a huge bus depot in New York City, and I think it was Manhattan or Brooklyn, I can't remember. It was Brooklyn, and basically that people have seen the result, the negative result of this air pollution in the context of increased number of cancer, asthmatic, and frequent incidence of asthma among the children, and so on and so forth. So all visible. So this organization, which became actually We Act, essentially a number of people got together to fight, and the end result was the fact that they managed to shut down the bus depot, which was the cause of the air pollution in the area. Essentially, the buses were parking and putting out fumes and so on. So there's an element of control there that came because the organization emerged, and the organization basically carried on from that point to other issues. So the power dynamics plays really an important role in even in the situation of any other issue that will be environmental or social in nature or racial issues. That power dynamics has to be really played out very upfront, not hidden, not thinking that these are looking at the academic colleagues. They're scientific people, they're fair-minded, they're enlightened, and so on and so forth. We make all those assumptions. That essentially those assumptions are the ones that actually lead to disastrous or perhaps not very helpful solutions at the end. And it's important to put that out right up front. And the other question is money. Money is really important to talk about, and not hiding it behind other kinds of issues, but essentially if the question of resources, financial resources, the key element that plays another role to see. And then the ownership of the knowledge, possession of knowledge, its ownership, and its application, and where it's going to go. Even if you start a project, so the result of that, well, who's going to have access to it and how it's going to be used? Because then again, there's an institutional dynamic here. As soon as an academic person takes up an idea and writes with her or his name attached to it, that basically becomes their property, intellectual property. You can't touch it. You can't do what you like to do with it. Whereas everyday citizen situation is really different.
Yeah.
So in that part, that kind of interplay is really important to have to say whose issues are and what tools are there, and people are enabled to actually be able to ask the right questions, the questions that they can raise, and boldly and putting it straight in front. And I'll come to an illustration that I mentioned earlier to see if that will be of any helpful to anyone.
Thank you so much, Khan.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really great points you point out there again to also explore further also later on. But yeah, maybe we can briefly link to that. I mean, Bianca, you have this concrete experience in inviting the academics in to check on things you have been developing on your terms, probably. But I'd be happy to hear how that has worked out. And then in the case of your project, Joanna, this non-framing, no, really putting out there the method of storytelling, but letting people interpret that and enact that as ever they feel relevant, and yeah, how this actually, the practicalities of this play out. So yeah, happy to hear from either of you. I think we lost Bianca again, so maybe Joanna, happy to hear from you.
And her battery is low, but yes, rightly said. I think also Khan mentioned some of the points that I was going to address. But yes, indeed. I mean, when you think through the elements of research, I would also say the reverse research, for example, how is it being understood also in academia or in the traditional sense of research? So let's consider it as also the diversity and inclusion of research, right? We can't have research in the same way. So if we are saying that the quality of a research that is in the form of images and stories, are we going to say that it is of less quality than an academic research or a more traditional research? Are we going to say that it is of less value than a particular kind of traditional or academic research? Can also mentioned a bit about the ownership. Who owns it? Because people ideally, one of the major drivers of economic independence, for example, is property, right? Ownership to property. And people having their names on particular publications and certain kinds of research in academia alone is also a form of property to them. But in this stage, we are having it in a different form of, people telling their own stories, and therefore their names are going to be there, their voices are going to be heard, their stories are going to be told. So who then owns this particular research? And when it comes to the documentation, we are looking at the different ways of documenting this particular kind of research. So we are using not just written formats, not just numbers, data, and raw information, but we are also curating the pictures, the pictorial aspect of it, the views that actually speak to what people are experiencing in the moment as the research is being done, or how they feel about it whilst the research is being done. And these documentation changes is what also the storytelling approach brings in, the diversity of it through the visuals. So in a way, it's also questioning, is it less of a research? Because then academia is saying that, okay, this is the way to go about it, but then creative ways of also running research, for example, is saying that there is an alternative way. And I like the way Ken also mentioned funding, for example. Even the way to fuel the diversity in research, right? It's also based on funding. Most of the funding now goes to very typical academic research. So how are the citizen social science approaches? How are the participatory approaches also being funded? How are the images, the pictorial kinds of research being funded? And I remember DW TV did they had a documentary over 10 years, and they were just documenting on a particular topic, income inequalities within the oil and gas industry in Ghana. And they had just been on the ground for 10 years. Nobody knew. They were just one-on-one interacting with people in the villages where the oil reserves were, where they were doing the offshore, from the offshore, how it was affecting the communities, to the kind of people who were actually benefiting from the oil, the oil drilling and all the oil business, who were now in the cities and not even close to the villages that were being affected. The fishing communities were being affected, their schools, and I mean, they were being forced to move away from their homes or push a little bit further. It affected some of the livelihoods. And over a 10-year span, they just put together like an hour video. And that told the stories of so many people, and you could see the effects of what had been done, as opposed to if it had just been on a paper, if it had just been the numbers, that you would have seen, okay, this has been the oil production in Ghana over this number of years, but it wouldn't tell you how the people in the community have been affected by it. So in a way, it is about the diversity of the research, what is being included, what is being excluded, and the alternative approaches. And if we are looking at the citizen social science, if you're looking at participatory approaches, it means that academia needs to now open up to bringing in other people, bringing in other players, bringing in other alternatives of documenting this research, of defining the quality of the research, because it's also of equal quality. It's also of equal value. And I think that that is one of the ways that conversations can be driven, so that academia would know that. I think it's also brings us to the mind that we shouldn't necessarily separate academia from citizenship approach, because either ways, it's still the same community, still the same people. So those synergies must always be put out there, that you can't do one without. So yeah, it's an interdependent research approach, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you. Bianca is not back yet, unfortunately. I would love to talk about the care issue also and their experiences there. But since we're also moving ahead in time, we are a few people left, but I would really like to, also welcome Stephanie and Isabel. I hope you're really there, who are both really, really experts and inspired by the topic. So I'm pretty sure you would love to engage directly. So let's open up to have a conversation all together, you know. Nice to see you. Would you like, do you have questions or like to also add from your experiences, which are really rich?
Thank you, Kirsty. Yeah, no, it was really very, very interesting. And what about was saying Joanna? Well, I fully agree that we have to go outside the academy and we have to look for different type of participants, and we have to open ourselves much more. So no, I could not agree more.
And maybe Isabel, because you have been so now involved with CoAct and also the whole process of writing this project proposal and framing in the way possible how civil society should be engaged and can be more in a driving seat and stuff. But therefore, I guess also, and not only in this project, but many others experience the hurdles now when it comes to funding restrictions and framings and how you have to predefine outputs. Maybe you can share a bit this situation, like you want to be much more, like equally engaging and stuff, and then there are all these boundaries put in your way probably that make things really difficult in the current structural setup we have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, really, CoAct was the first opportunity to try new things. Well, we had some other, but at a large scale. So it's difficult, well, because, the typical reasons that citizen science is more framed into the natural sciences and not so much social science. And also because social issues are not at the center right now of citizen science. But I think it's changing really a lot. And the last projects, even at the European level that have been funded, are really targeting social issues. And I think this is a trend that will stay now. So it's a good way forward.
I always find it such an irony in itself when we talk about this, because and when we remember what Khan was talking about in the beginning, he's been working on this since the 80s, and the discourse of participation in the social sciences is so much stronger and historically more loaded than in the hard sciences. So it's such an ironic thing that now there's a new approach trying to fight to come to life next to its big brother of citizen science, whereas there is all this massive experience, and even more important, not rooted in the West, but actually like the roots of participation within social sciences have a much stronger attachment and really roots not outside of like Western scope. So maybe, I don't know, Khan, you have been in that since decades.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's actually it's interesting. And I'm delighted to actually see that the European Union and the organizations involved basically took the initiative of the citizens science approach. And I think when the first was, which was a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember, it was 2014, I think, somewhere around there. I think this is important conjunction in the European context to pick up from the experience of other places and other regions to build on it. Fundamentally, universities have not been really questioned in this kind of critical way. Back then, in the 80s and 90s, the first line of attack by the academics was that our community-based research was not credible. It was not scientific. It failed a number of their scientific criteria, which all came from the academia in the first place. So you couldn't question them. So what was happening back then, we had a few daring academics who actually opposed their own university dogmas and joined us in saying that no, community-based research is a valid approach, and we have to go, and essentially took off. Now, it took off to such a degree that from a small number of institutions who embraced the idea to extremely widespread, like throughout the United States and Canada, especially the United States. Practically every university has a community-based research component of one form or another. That's how it's basically spread out. And it's a good thing, it's a positive thing in many ways. So they embrace communities. So in the context of Europe, basically it's new, in many ways I think it's new, but the science shops, which been around since the 70s, they never actually indulged in incorporating the question of community-based research, but then later on did, and they did an incredibly good job in incorporating community-based research or participatory research interchangeably. So now they're actually essentially a very important institution, and in the context of based, although they're inside the universities, but at least to see their projects and activities are rooted in the community in various forms. So in a way, one other element of the question of the citizenship, and in the United States, actually, volunteerism and everyday citizenship participation has been a landmark and quite remarkable history around it. There are a lot of literally ordinary individuals who have tapped on things, and they have created on things, and they have created things. They had no institutional connection. They had no personal objectives of any kind. So actually, the United States is a rich territory in that sense to draw on, to say what is exactly an everyday citizen. And I'll give you one example. It was actually in Kentucky, or there was a school teacher who incidentally discovered that basically in the backyard of their homes, the soil was contaminated, and they did not see that connection, other than seeing that, again, a large number of people were having incident of cancer, or varieties of cancer, and nobody knew where in the hell this cancer was coming from. So essentially, discovery was basically just incidentally that the soil was contaminated, and they realized the whole area, basically everybody in their backyard had this contaminated soil. And this person, who had no involvement in any shape or form other than being a parent, tapped on this and contact. And when I started contacting her, she couldn't even come up with any kind of frame other than saying there's a problem. We don't know what the hell to do with it. And essentially, the conversation, and I think one of the colleagues from Africa mentioned, Joanna, the question of storytelling. It took a form of storytelling. They started telling each other, coming together, and so on. And then the academics, of course, heard. And in fact, of all places, Harvard University, a faculty happened to be an immigrant background, a Korean background. He actually showed a personal interest in this story, not an academic interest, but actually a story. But he was an academic nonetheless. Essentially, just took off, and the dynamic that Rijal mentioned, the Korean background, because he had a different kind of hearing about this issue. He took a personal interest in this story. So it essentially led to other things, but the people managed to have control over this knowledge because the knowledge actually came from their backyards.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And I mean, sorry. I just wanted to also, because we are running a bit on time, to link back a bit to Anna, and it was a nice bridge there, because that also reinforces the question of what purpose should science serve. And this I found really on one of many outstanding aspects of your story, Joanna, the direct linkage between your methodological approach and the connection to the media and to brands and the creative industry at large, and how this reinforces actually your methodology, your enacted methodology to serve a direct purpose in the place where it's supposed to make that difference, rather than being looked into, being written up and being put into a shelf, to put it in an extreme way, of course. So I don't know if maybe you can talk a bit about how this relation between the creative industry and your approach.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And I think one of the, so like I said earlier, we need to consider it as a diversity of research so that we don't kind of limit it to just one particular approach. So the methodology that we use in creative industry, for example, some people think that the moment you're using a creative approach or a more citizenship social science approach, or for example, human-centered design, then there's no end to it, or it's just completely open. But there are structures to it. We film it over time. We have a specific topic that we are looking at. So we organize it in such a way, even if it's a video or it's an image, there are certain criteria to which we give that are being shaped around it. So it's not, yes, we make it free range in the sense that the person owns the narrative of the research or the subject matter, but then we also make sure that it connites or it collides with elements of science, for example, like the structure, like the experimentation, the processes through which we put it, and people see themselves going through all these different elements of science. So in the presentation, I showed a bit more about how it is also an organized body of knowledge. It speaks to a particular topic. People are doing videos and showing images on specific issues like income inequalities, like healthcare. When COVID happened, we wouldn't have seen the impact of COVID if there were no images to see, if we didn't see the dead bodies, if we didn't see the countries, how people were suffering it, if we didn't see the situation in videos on CNN, on BBC, how people were reacting to, you know, difficulty in breathing, it would have been very difficult to let the world know exactly what was happening. So these are the elements through which we see that, yes, indeed, it's free range. We bring in people in, but we want them to own the story. We want them to be the one to tell it in the experience, but then we put it in the structures of time. So whether it is a 1 video, 2 images, 3 images, or 5 minutes video, or 2 minutes video, or the documentary is being, or the research is being done over 10 years, over 5 years, and being compressed in time to show you in, let's say, 1 hour. These are all structures that are put in place, and it therefore doesn't necessarily negate the whole element of research and the normal academic science out of the creative ways through which we are bringing research. So I think it's good to think through it, that it's not necessarily alienating it, but we are just bringing the synergies and more emphasis and more relatable elements. Because even if it's hard science, even if it's an academic person going to do research on you know, the traditional, in the very traditional sense, we forget that the person doing the researcher or the scientist himself is also a human person. So, and that already is a social being. That person is already interacting with other elements within even that research environment. So in a way, it tells you that how the researcher also feels, how they interpret it, how they observe, and how they document and report it alone, including the biases and the nuances that exist within their reportage, also brings in that element of social science. And why is it so important? Because another person would probably interact with the same environment in a very different way. So
yeah. Thank you so much. I could really continue this conversation for so much longer. We are at the end of the webinar, unfortunately. Bianca's connection didn't come back. I do, however, we will certainly document all of this and take, you know, our lessons learned from to continue this and build on this first conversation that we had now. So I really hope we find further moments to meet in this format. So in terms of in a webinar, then we also have, let me briefly perhaps get back to the presentation, as we also have our anyways, I will I will share it with you later. We do have we started to build up a community around these discourses, the Open Citizen Social Science community, where we have a Signal group that I heartwarmly invite you to join. And we will organize monthly hangouts, so more informal meetups, which we already started. We started one to co-create the agenda of this, to explore which topics and discourses are actually relevant and important to the community. and community members will also moderate or in whatever way, like shape, own the different hangouts. So it would be also a great environment to dive deeper into all these very, very important aspects that I think, yeah, could like deserve further discourse and acting up on them, of course. So thank you so much.
Do we have any time at all for a final comment or anything or not? Or we're just signing off?
Please go ahead.
Gillian, I just want to thank and I really appreciate the fact to be part of this, such a wonderful, colorful people here. It's so delightful, and also learn a lot about all these different contexts. Great. And I must actually also point out that the gist of my comments are basically emphasizing the community civil society, but not being anti-academic or anti-universities. That should be taken in the context, because again, the idea is to basically promote everyday citizens' rights and responsibilities, also ownership over knowledge that I create. Thank you so much for the opportunity. All the best with everyone. No problem.
Thanks a lot for your time, everyone, and the really, really great insights into your work.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.